Hello, folks, and welcome. We are going to talk about the Zachariah Anderson case again. Now, we have done some updates throughout the year since the conviction and sentencing. This one is a little bit different because it has more with how can you protect yourself when the forensics lab itself is corrupt, or maybe not corrupt, but just wants to help. So that is what we are going to talk about today. Okay, welcome to the show. Yeah, around 7 months ago, I reported to you, my viewers, about Tiffany Roy, one of the leading DNA forensics expert in the United States, who wrote a letter to the Wisconsin's Department of Justice and to the crime lab itself, who handled the evidence in the Zachariah Anderson case. So let's go through that, because since then I have doubled my subscriber count. So maybe there are a bunch of you out there who is wondering, oh, what when? Well, this is a trial that was called on Law and C-Word the jealous ex-boyfriend murder case, or something stupid like that. Pure clickbait. And most of us who sat down for that trial went in, seems like a clear case. And then they started. And then they continued. And quite soon, I mean, I sat there often with Jeff and Hayden, Legal Voices and Aussie Overlord, and other people going, where's the actual evidence of this? And witness after witness came up. His Zach's ex-girlfriend testified, and oh boy, if you've been watching the Karen Reed trial, the evasiveness and have no idea, yeah, that's Sadie Beecham for you. And other friends of the victim, Rosario Guterres, came up to the witness stand, and this is highly suspicious. Why are the two of you suddenly showing up at the alleged crime scene? And why is everybody turning up at the crime scene almost at the same time? This is strange. And not to talk about the prison snitch Munch. What does it say on the mug? This is the channel motto. You can't un-F a cluster F. And hello, everybody. I see John Commune, Swedish Mom, Jazz Wall, Melissa, Reform Convict, Special K, Gwendolyn is here. Yeah. I think if you check below the stream, you should have a link to where you can get one of your own. The origin of this, I was on Hayden's, what's the Overlord's channel, where we talked about, I mean, with questioning the witness, and all of a sudden they yell out something, and then the judge says, "Oh, you must ignore that." And we started saying something. "Oh, well, you can't put the toothpaste back into the tube." And then it got more rowdy, like you can't shovel the crap back into the horse. And in a stroke of genius, you can't unf a cluster F. Oh, now where were we? Yeah, Munch, the prison snitch, who claimed that Zach made a in his sleep admission of guilt. And I have to say, if you believed this Munch guy, you need to check yourself in. You really need to, because he didn't say a word that was truthful, not one. Which goes back to, I don't trust any prison snitch, because prison snitches has every incentive to lie. If they lie and get caught, nothing happens. They are still under the same charge. If they lie and get believed, they get an easier time, maybe a lesser sentence. And for Munch, who was he was looking at life in jail, because it's 15 strikes kind of deal for him, federal thing. It's, I mean, kilos of drugs. He was out and about 4 months after the trial. How could the judge even let that in as special case? Because the judge was, this was the same judge as in the Kyle Rittenhouse case, so he had somewhat of a good reputation. But apparently, a few months before this trial started, he hit his head and had some kind of brain injury, and it showed. At the time, his wife was battling cancer, so some days he just cut the day short because he needed to get. So this was a cluster F, a perfect storm of cluster Fs in this trial. Yeah, as it's Trinton says, judge believed in the idea of let it in and let the jury decide weight, which is wild. Yeah, I know he wasn't the best in the Rittenhouse either, but he had that "don't get brains into me" thing going on, and people, ooh, he's funny. And John Comyon says, I find it hilarious. Zach encountered Mark Jensen during this. Yeah. But let's get back to just a rundown of the case. Now, eventually we came up to the forensics evidence. And I have had streams with evidence in this trial that should have let Zachariah free on the spot. For instance, there was somebody else's, an unknown person's DNA at the crime scene. That was not Zach. People have had convictions overturned by that kind of evidence, but this jury just ignored it. The fact that there was no evidence whatsoever of Zach ever being on that crime scene. No DNA, no fingerprint, no surveillance video, and the fact that, according to the prosecution's timeline, he could not have been there. If he made the time back and forth to his house, he would have been caught at, let me see here. I will show you. Let's see here. I will show you at the stage. Those blue dots are road cameras. If Zach, in any way, shape, or form, could have gone to Rosalio's apartment and back, that is the amount of traffic cameras and speed cameras and road cameras he had to pass. None of them were presented in court as catching Zachariah on camera. Not one. Not one from businesses, not doorbell cameras, nothing. Reform Convict says, I find it hard to believe if he had went there, no camera saw him. He's not that smart to avoid. Yeah, I mean, there's so much. I mean, the prosecution both argued he must be the absolute smartest man in the world who could avoid all of those cameras and still made it back and forth, back there and back again in the timeline. But at the same time, stupid enough to take the victim with him. This was a multi-apartment complex on a spring evening at 9 p.m. in the height of COVID. Everybody and their horse was looking out of a window at the time. There was some easement in the restrictions at the time, so people were also out and about. Not a single witness could place Zach on the crime scene. Not one. There and back. Yeah. Now, but the number one crucial evidence was a pin-sized speck of what the prosecution and what happened? Of what the prosecution and the forensics lab said was blood. Here's the thing. It wasn't big enough. When I say pin-sized, I mean pin-sized. Let's see if I find that. Again, new big picture. This is an example picture of what you see when you spray luminol and the glow-in-the-dark thingy on an area where there are remains, have been remains, or something had been committed. So that's the top picture. We'll show you in a bit. The bottom picture here is Zach's van. Let's see if you can spot it. Yeah. The top picture, bathtub with some what may or may not be blood from a crime scene. The bottom picture is Zach's van. That is the van where the prosecution claimed he put a rolled up carpet with a 6 foot, 270 pound man, a bloody mess, drove like a maniac home in time to pick up the phone with his then girlfriend. Do you see any holes in that theory? Because if you drive like a maniac to make that time, there should be something. There weren't. That's one of the I'm just telling you. That bottom picture, the only needs to be locked up forever because that is horrible. Yeah. But the forensics expert, Miss Lisa Treffinger, or Mrs., I don't care, claimed even though they have tested dozens of spots of brownish spots, not one came back as blood. But this one, they claimed, had to be because how it looked. And she was allowed to testify to that, even though as a forensics expert who wasn't proffered as a blood spatter expert, was allowed to testify about it. That pin-sized could only be tested for DNA or blood. They showed DNA. And on in the trial, she testified on the question, did that come back as a match to Rosalio? She answered yes. That was the extent of it. No this many alleles, no 1 in a trillion, no nothing. And here's the thing. They didn't have a full profile of Rosalio Gutierrez. They only had from his mother's side, not from his father's side, because his father also mysteriously disappeared a bunch of years earlier under unknown circumstances, as did a cousin or niece or something like that. So Rosalio was the third person in that family to mysteriously disappear. Was that a lead they checked out? Nope. So when Lisa Treffinger testified, it was a match. We have no idea to what degree. Because, first of all, 50% are already, was it 2 alleles, 5 alleles, 1 allele? How big is the Gutierrez family? We don't know. How many? If you tested the Gutierrez family, how many more would have been a quote-unquote match? We don't know. Because they didn't test. Now here comes where Tiffany Roy, one of, if not the leading forensics DNA experts in the United States. So I'll go through her complaint letter to the Wisconsin Department of Justice and the crime lab itself. So let's go through it a bit. Dun, dun, dun. No, not that one. That one. Tiffany Roy, Forensics Aid LLC, blah, 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 blah. Miss King. This formal complaint is written to Nicole Rome, who is the administrator of the Division of Forensic Sciences at the Wisconsin Department of Justice, about the testimony of Lisa Treffinger in the case of Wisconsin's versus Zachariah Anderson. This testimony is publicly available on YouTube, beginning around the 5:14 mark of that video. We streamed that trial, so you can find it here as well. And the streaming of a testimony can and should be observed. It was provided to me by a lawyer/blogger who asked my opinion of the testimony for his research. After reviewing her videotape testimony, I had several serious quality concerns which I determined needed to be reviewed by the laboratory quality team. Now, I'm not that person who, the lawyer blogger, is Steve Gosney. And if you don't know who Steve Gosney is, you should go to his channel and subscribe to him. He doesn't stream that often, but when he does, it's worth it. Normally, a complaint about quality concerns would be directed to the quality assurance manager at a specific crime laboratory. It is noted that on the DOJ DFS website that there is a specific bureau in place to control and preserve efficient quality within the laboratory known as the Quality Assurance Bureau. However, the search for a direct name, phone number, and email for the QAB was unsuccessful. This bureau is meant to uphold their quality statement, which is, and here it is, to achieve and maintain accreditation under the international standard, general requirements for the competence of testing and calibration laboratories, a forensic side, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. The last two quality support goals listed are meant to make sure quality control and assurance are reviewed, maintained, and updated if required. Though, when I attempted to find contact information for this bureau, it was not publicly available, which defeats the goal of continual improvement of the quality system if complaints have no direct line of communication on laboratory products. The only contact information, and then she goes on to describe how she was passed around through phone calls and how that in itself is a danger for due process, for how a crime lab should conduct itself. Yeah, sorry, Jim. Yeah, I was on blah short. Blah blah. you got one extra. Yeah, of course. If you don't have a quality control, you get less complaints. Hello, Taz. And then she goes into the meat of this. This complaint is about the testimony of Lisa Treffinger offered in the case of Wisconsin versus Zachariah Anderson. Upon review of her testimony, Lisa Treffinger reports she took a position in the quality assurance program as a specialist. With such a position, she should certainly be interviewed about her sworn statement in above-mentioned case and should not be involved in the investigation of this quality complaint. Ms. Treffinger made several misstatement and overstatement of the tests she performed and the data she reported in the Anderson case. She makes statements when prompted that use the phrase reasonable degree of scientific certainty, which has no meaning in science, and the use of which has been recommended against. She goes on to say she can determine the source of the DNA generally by completing testing and provided evidence, though this is one of the first limitations addressed in a publication called Misleading DNA Evidence, Reasons for Miscarriage of Justice. That's kind of a strong title. That's really a strong, that's quite huge. What do you think? The source of crimes in DNA is unknown and unknowable. Source attribution for crimes in samples has been largely abandoned in forensics DNA for more conservative methods such as the Bayes theorem and the likelihood ratio. Source attribution is a victim of the uniqueness fallacy and misconstrues the meaning of the weight of the comparison. The uniqueness fallacy is when she said, when she got a question, was this a match to Rosario? And she answered yes, because it has zero meaning. It is a fallacy. simply because you cannot make that statement. You can't. It's not proper. You can only speak to likelihood. Just because match, yeah, but well, what's the match? Well, 1 in 10 in Wisconsin. Yeah, we simply don't know. We have no idea because that was not testified to, which was improper. Source: the random match probability nor the likelihood ratio have any correlation between the number of people on the planet. Assume when either number exceeds the number of people on the planet, that does not mean the DNA profile trait combination is unique to that person, especially when you only have 50% of Mr. Gutierrez's DNA profile to start with. Then it only gets worse. For instance, in Kenosha, Wisconsin, around 100,000 people. If the likelihood was 1 in 10,000, now that sounds like a huge number. Yeah, but that also means that there is 10 people in Kenosha alone who has the same match. If the probability is 1 in 500, you see what I mean? That is why you can't make that statement in court, in my opinion. No, not even in my opinion. In the leading DNA forensic expert in the country, in the United States. Though we might expect a random match to an evidence DNA profile to be a rare event, rare events happen. Source attribution suggests the chance of a random match is 0, and that is not the case. And here's some examples. Lisa Treffinger fails to correct and in fact confirms with the prosecuting attorney that her results can be stated within the standard of scientific certainty in the event a question is asked, and her scientific opinion aligns with what is implied or questioned. From the National Commission on Forensic Science within NIST, a paper titled Testing using the term reasonable scientific certainty was released. This paper discussed the many issues involved when using this blanket term, such as its misleading guidance, non-scientific foundation, lack of specificity, and the term's criticism from academic and policy writing. This terminology is outdated and was not originally intended to be within the court system to verify scientific knowledge in expertise within criminal cases. This has been established for decades, folks, for decades, that you cannot testify like this in a criminal court. The term scientific certainty is barely acknowledged in academia, should never be used in a court of law because it is misleading. The words reasonable degree and scientific certainty should not be part of any scientific explanation or presentation. These are words suggested to scientists for lawyers as part of legal advocacy. Nothing is 100% in science, and therefore using phrases like scientific certainty are misleading to jurors and lay people who are unaware of the limitations and error rate of the science being questioned. And then it goes on. Tiffany Roy is annihilating Lisa Treffinger. Her testimony, even her expertise in itself, she questions in this letter. Because such a simple thing, because since this sample was so small, they could only test it once. Now that opens up for a bunch of things that can happen. What if the result is damaged? If the result is false positive? If it turns out to be held in a red cup? I don't know. So when you only have one attempt, you have to make sure that every step of the process is recorded. Now give me a wild guess if Lisa Treffinger recorded anything. If your guess is she didn't record anything, then you are correct. So, yeah. And even if the DNA profile was a somewhat of a match, folks, listen to me carefully here. DNA in itself is not evidence of guilt. DNA has to have corroborating evidence. And it has to be very, very clean corroborating evidence. You have to exclude the possible ways of contamination, the possible ways of touch and transfer DNA. Now, this piece, the pin-sized prick of DNA, was found in the back of Zach's work van, which is a family van. It's not a big white box van. It is a family van he uses for work. In that van, he picks up and drives around his kids, who have been, just to say so, Rosalio Guterres and Sadie Beecham. Well, they did. And this is not applauding. It's the sound. There's every possible way of transfer DNA. Sadie puts the kids in Zach's van. While she does it, she leans over, touches the wall, which has the inside of the car, which might have whatever. That is the risk of transfer DNA. That is why you have to have corroborating evidence. And there were none. But people are in this CSI effect. Oh, they have DNA. That must mean something. No, it fucking doesn't. And we know in this case we had police officers whose stupidity matches the ones in the Karen Reed case. Let me give you an example. Rosalio Guterres disappeared. There was blood in the apartment. They're outside of the apartment. Okay, there is the garbage container where everybody puts their garbage. Could he have been put there? But did they test the inside of it? No, they didn't. It had been emptied the day before. They actually tracked down the rough position where that garbage container was emptied in the landfill. They had it staked out, mapped out. Had they gone through that, who knows? They might have found Mr. Guterres' remains. What did they do? They heard there was made an arrest. And they left. All they had to do was spend an hour just going through checking things. They chose not to. And now it's way too late. I mean, that landfill is overburdened everything. They could have done so much. And they chose to not. So we have, yet again, a year ago now, lazy investigators, a prosecutor who shouldn't be a prosecutor, a judge who may or may not have, should have recused themselves. But back to this rogue DNA expert. 7 months ago, Tiffany Roy wrote this letter to the DOJ and the crime lab. And for 7 months, there's no reply from either the DOJ or the crime lab itself. Not even a response that they have received this letter. When you send a letter to a government body, there should always be an acknowledgement. We have received this complaint. Not even that have she received. Wisconsin, DOJ, and this Kenosha crime lab wants to sweep this under the rug. They got their conviction. Now they want us to be silent. I'm not silent. I can't do silent. You can't un-F a cluster F. Becca Lynn says here, the victim's loved ones should be outraged at this lack of investigation. They aren't. They believe the prosecution story. And they are friends with people who should be better suited suspects than Zachariah Anderson. For you who are new here, there is so much to go through with this. Let's bring up another thing. Sadie Beecham wanted to have a serious relationship with Rosalio Guterres Jr. The same day, if I remember correctly, she said to him via text, I want you to be my person, which apparently means exclusivity. The same evening, he had already set up a date with another woman. And that woman and Sadie were not the only women he either had been involved with, tried to be involved with, or attempted to be involved with. There are, to my knowledge, 4 women that intersects at roughly the same time. Four women. Yeah. Mr. Guterres was either owed money or owed money to people. There was nothing in between. How good was Mr. Rosalio with money? He had at 40 years old, he had a joint account with his mother in order to keep a roof over his head and his kids when he had them to visit. That's how good he was with money. He didn't even have his own car. His mother, at age 40, his mother had to get him a car. Other possible suspects, there are at least, in my opinion, 3 in this, who all testified. And for me, there's Mike, who admitted in interviews that he and Rosalio Gutierrez Jr. had, when Rosalio owed him money, he more or less had to force the money back. He had reportedly he was owed, or one of them owed each other money. It's not really clear because the investigators didn't bother to check it out, so we don't know. The claim from the prosecution, oh, it's only $50. How the fuck do you know? You Jesus Christ. We don't know. Mike was spotted in between the day the prosecution claimed Rosalio died and when the crime scene was discovered. Mike was seen with a rolled up rug in the back of his van because one of his mates said, "Can I have that? Because I'm going to carpet the outdoor patch," or something like that. And Mike, instead of, "Sure, have it. It's full of cat piss. Go ahead. You can have it. Saves me the trouble." No, he refuses to hand it over. Maybe that might not even have been a big deal. Unless Mike, did he take it to the local dump? No. Did he take it to the landfill? No. He, if I remember correctly, crossed state border to get rid of that rug in a different state. And that's not suspicious? No. According to prosecution, Mike was a hero. So all in all, the DNA expert's testimony is maybe the least corrupt, one of the lesser corrupt things in this trial. But they are the ones who should be impartial. They should report on the evidence and evidence alone. And this makes this so much dangerous because without her testimony, a flawed testimony, much of everything else wouldn't have mattered. But that now they had heard DNA. And Zachariah Anderson was convicted. So now Zachariah Anderson is, well, he has the chance of appeal, but appeals often loses. There's such a minuscule percentage that have a successful appeal. But me and others want to give Zach the best possible appeal, chance of appeal. So this is Zachariah Anderson's Gives and Go. I'm putting the link here. They have raised 61,000 out of 65,000. And remember, sadly, this is the bare minimum. Just getting the transcript from the trial cost over $10,000. Then they have to have the lawyer's fee. They have to write everything up. So an appeal to the appellate court costs about 150,000. 65,000 is what gets you started, the bare minimum. So if you wouldn't mind and you have $1, $5, $10, $20 to spare, don't spend it on me. I do my grift stream now and then. Yes, he has Natalie Wisco on the appeals case. That is one of the best lawyers he could get. And if you don't know who Natalie Wisco is, Natalie Wisco was on the team that got Kyle Rittenhouse acquitted. She's a big deal, a really big deal. But in order, she can't work for free. So again, I do my grift stream another time. Today, I want you to take those $2, $5, $10, $20 and give it to the Zachariah Anderson Appeals Fund. I hope now again, if you don't have it, don't go searching in the sofa. Only if you have. That is the update I have for you for now. The Wisconsin DOJ and the crime lab are ghosting the leading forensic DNA expert in United States because they don't want to be criticized. They don't want to change. They are perfectly happy with their subpar conduct, using methods and ways to testify that has been abandoned for decades. And but I will leave you off with about 7-8 months ago, Zach took the time to send me a message, and I want you to see it. This is the guy we need to get a fair chance of an appeal. Thank you.
Okay, let me see.
But let me at least say, because I know Nicholas, there might be some lag to this. I see you're kind of skipping around, but Nicholas in particular has been part of the group for a long time. Early in, recognized that it was bogus early in, and I appreciate all the help. And he's still here, and it's super cool, and I really appreciate that kind of stuff. And I know anybody that actually bothers to look is going to know how bogus this is. And it's really hard to get people to take notice in the first place. But I know he's been out there, and I know he's been doing things, and I know he's been connected. And I want to go visit the guy, and be on the show and go visit the guy and all sorts of stuff. I mean, I just think it's super cool. All the help, thank you. Super cool, and I appreciate it. And everybody else too. But yeah, he's in particular, I don't know, he jumps smart. When people talk about like other people's shows, I don't really know other people's shows, but I know his because his was like one of the first ones that got mentioned. And I'm like, really? Somebody's actually doing something about the case? I'm like, oh, that's cool. So anyway, I don't know. Don't know the guy, but really appreciate it.